Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Lolo Bunny here, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos once again. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Pony Kart DS, the ROM hack of Mario Kart DS for the Nintendo DS. So, yesterday, we did somehow manage to show you guys the battle mode by experiencing not only Balloon Battle, but in addition to Shine Runners as well. Well, to be more accurate though, during the involves within Balloon Battle, we did somehow select it up to 3 stages within Team Battle. In addition to that, when it comes to Shine Runners, then we somehow select the other 3 stages, but in Battle Royale. So relatively speaking out, that was actually a lot of fun, so you can get the idea for this point. So today, for this video, is that this is going to be the true finale of our Let's Play of Pony Kart DS, a ROM hack of Mario Kart DS, by simply trying to actually show you guys the final 2 modes, which appears to be Time Trials and Versus Race. So because of that though, although nothing drastically different compared to the forms of how it does on the vanilla version of Mario Kart DS. So for instance though, let's get into Time Trials first, and as you can tell, for the fact that you can actually participate on several race tracks on your different times, so you can also actually access to DS Download Play by actually just trying to send ghost data or receive ghost data as much as you want. So let's not get ahead of ourselves at this point right now, because the main focus of this video is to try to show you guys to see how the fact of Time Trials actually plays out in this particular ROM hack. So, and as you can tell, we've only down to the final 2 characters for this point. So as far as Time Trials are concerned, we might as well able to go for the mischievous Discord, because as far as I'm aware, we'll save Spike the Dragon for last for the final mode, which is of course Versus Race. So either way, Discord is the only choice for the Time Trials. So as you can see, that his default card was actually interesting, which appears to be the Smooth, which, if for those of you who don't know, that particular the Smooth creature was actually from the forms of Season 5 episode in well, let's just say, in one of those episodes in particular, where Discord was actually jealous of the forms of Fluttershy's new friend called Treehugger during the forms of the Night Gala or anything else like that. I mean, mind you, it's been 10 years since we've last known about that particular episode, because as a matter of fact, though, as you probably already expect, that Season 5 of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic's been out for about, 10 years now, since in 2015. So you can get the idea for this point. So, yeah, for the most part, we'll try to test out the forms of 2 tracks in particular, such as TikTok Clock, and eventually with the pony-themed course. So, yeah, for the most part, though, it's about the fact that, again, much like the forms of how it does on the vanilla version of Mario Kart DS, depending on what cards you're going to be choosing, like, for example, with the large cards, you're able to actually access to 3 mushrooms, or, in some cases in this mod in particular, 3 muffins, whilst if you try to select the standard cards, you're able to actually access to 2 muffins or mushrooms. And finally, if you manage to choose the small cards, you're only going to be able to actually access to 1 mushroom or 1 muffin. So, yeah, you can get the idea for the specific difference depending on what cards you're going to be using. So, I digress. So yeah, a few things I want to talk about this is though, and that's what appears to be for the fact that today's date is of course the 7th of June today, in some cases in 2025 today, and gee, I'm actually very excited about the forms of tomorrow's video, because, well, can't tell at this point, just because no matter what though is about the fact that we were, again, originally trying to actually do a dedicated video for to try to celebrate the release of the brand new Nintendo system, which is of course Nintendo Switch 2, but of course, like we've already established that before, since that Joy did somehow already mention about this though, the video itself has officially been delayed until, well, not long now, until tomorrow, because no matter what though, like we've already established that before, we need to get those games finished before we're able to actually focusing on the upcoming special video, so stay tuned for that. Especially considering for the fact that, well, after all, a lot of hype is now over, so relatively speaking, that was about the fact that we can to expect of what's to come. So, yeah, for the most part, that was about the fact that there's also some other things worth noting for, is that speaking of the forms of the Nintendo Switch 2, for I've realized, yes, much like the forms of how it does it for Nintendo Switch 1, that the Miis are back once again. Because, well, as a matter of fact, about the fact that the majority of the Switch 1 games will be in backwards compatibility for Nintendo Switch 2, so that probably explains why, about the fact that Nintendo is still supporting Mii's as avatars. So either way, because, you know, ever since in 2006 for the Nintendo Wii, did somehow firstly introduce the Mii's, so as a result, it'll continue that tradition for the sake of the phones of the future Nintendo systems, like, you know, Nintendo 3DS, Nintendo Wii U, Nintendo Switch, and now Nintendo Switch 2. So no matter what though, everything else will be come to expect, basically. Oh, in addition to mobile phones, if you're trying to able to actually access to, you know, Nintendo accounts and stuff like that. So yeah, you get the idea for this point. So as you can tell, that we briefly shown off the phones that particular replay right there on TikTok clock. So no matter what though, everything else will be come to expect for time trials basically. Now, as far as I can recall correctly, that in terms of the forms of the actual, let's just say, if we go back onto TikTok clock right there, as you can see, the staff ghost data was actually appeared. Well, here's the catch though, it only appears in the actual normal courses, because compared to the forms of how it does it on the custom-made courses, it was not being accessible when it comes to the staff ghost data, because as far as I'm aware, we'll demonstrate this to you now during the forms of the vinyl roadway. So because of that, as Discord with the forms of, without a doubt, is the most broken cards in the entire game, or specifically Mario Kart DS in general, when it comes to likely trying to deal with the forms of snake drifting mechanics, that's of course Dry Bomber. So, because, you know, that card was originally for dry bones, so, but of course, no matter what though, that Derby did somehow manage to able to ride on this thing at first glance, so, but I digress. So, anyway, and the next thing I want to discuss upon is that, unfortunately though, Fortnite on Nintendo Switch 2 still does not include the Save the World mode, which I've no idea why that Nintendo Switch owners didn't seem to able to actually access to that particular mode. Well, I suppose time will definitely tell though. I mean, mind you, I haven't exactly experienced Fortnite for myself, but I do know for a fact it's incredibly popular back in during the forms have been some time in 2019 because of the forms of floss dancing, and you get the idea for this point. So I do know for a fact that my love, Bugs Bunny, was expecting to try to able to practice that technique, but it was very difficult to execute sometimes. But regardless of everything else though, everything else will be come to expect. So anyway, let's get into the forms of the next conversation as far as I'm aware. That's what appears to be for the fact that we got ourselves our first look of the forms of the upcoming James Bond 007 video game. And believe it or not, the actual game itself is basically an origin story of how James Bond becomes an agent of some sort, which is pretty interesting, all things considered. Well, not only are we able to actually get ourselves a new trailer for it, but also the new gameplay footage as well. So I suppose we'll discuss more about that once we're able to actually dive into the majority of the versus races, basically. Now, as you can tell on the top screen right there, there's no different camera perspectives, mainly because, as far as I'm aware, unlike the regular normal Mario Kart DS courses, that the camera angles are always shifting, whilst compared to the forms of how it does on the custom-made courses, that there's no such thing as the forms of the different camera perspectives during the forms of in certain angles and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a little bit weird though, but regardless of such though, yeah, that's how the time trials works. So self-explanatory, especially noticeable about the fact that you can able to actually delete your ghost save data if you wanted to, but to do that though, you need to able to actually access to the records menu. So yeah, as you can see, there's no staff ghost data on these custom-made courses, just because obviously that was about the fact that, well, it's just fan-made, basically. So either way, so that's that. So now let's move on to the final mode of this particular ROM hack, and that's of course versus race, which is self-explanatory because when it first introduced the forms of technically quick run ever since in Mario Kart Super Circuit on the Game Boy Advance, and it'll continue that tradition for Mario Kart DS in addition to Mario Kart Wii, and for some odd reason not Mario Kart 7 for some odd reason, but with Mario Kart 8 and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, including Mario Kart World, did somehow manage to able to bring in versus race after all. So at the very least, that's that. So, of course, we're able to actually set the exact same settings as the forms of the vanilla version of Mario Kart DS. So, just for instance, though, we'll go through teams, basically. And as far as the class itself goes, we'll go on mirror mode and CPUs on hard mode. And on top of that, with winning streaks, we have to go for 8 wins. So either way, so of course we're able to actually see certain tracks in mirror mode. Well, at least we've already technically saw TikTok clock already, as you can tell, because obviously though I did manage to able to select the random selection in terms of the forms of some courses. So anyway, so as far as I'm aware, that as you can see on screen, I'm going to be playing as the final playable character in this ROM hack, and that's of course Spike the Dragon, which as you can tell on his default cards was obviously Gem Driver, because every time whenever he did manage to able to actually have the gem, that obviously though he attempts to eat the gem itself, which obviously though is about the fact that that becomes a thing for its the forms of some episodes in particular. Well, mind you though, it has been quite a while since I actually have last seen or last rewatched certain episodes of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, just because no matter what though, that I've been busy recently, especially noticeable considering for the fact that we just want to get these some aspects done, but even then though, you get the idea for this point. So anyway, in regards to the forms of the new James Bond game, which it does have its name by the way, and that's what it appears to be called, 007 First Light, which means about the fact that, like I established that before, that game is basically it's like an origin story kind of game. So as a result though, it does look pretty interesting, which I do really wish if there was going to be a movie adaptation for it, but of course that's not the case unfortunately. But regardless of such though, that indeed it will be coming onto next generation of consoles for sure, mainly PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X/S, and even Nintendo Switch 2, which as a matter of fact though, because it's already been confirmed for a tease for it, so I guess that makes it pretty obvious that will be coming onto Nintendo Switch 2. So as far as I'm aware, the release date for the game is going to be releasing until 2026, which as a matter of fact, that's going to be the year to able to actually try to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Bonds of No Time to Die, which as a matter of fact, we still have no idea what the next James Bond movie is going to be, but I suppose time will definitely tell though, because generally speaking, we still on the forms have been towards at the very end of the first half of 2025. So yeah, you get the idea for that point. So, and on top of that, there's also Ghost of Yoti, I think is what it says anyway, which as a matter of fact, according to the forms of the ending portion of that particular trailer, it during the forms of in a state of play direct, well, it may look like there's going to be a full-on gameplay deep dive until specifically in next month in July. So, and I believe if I can recall correctly, that state of play is going to be once again going to be taking part of the forms of that stuff. And now we come to the final game announcement in Journey Forms of in a State of Play Direct, and that's what appears to be a brand new Marvel fighting game, which as a matter of fact, despite the fact that the actual voice actors are going to be mostly voiced in Japanese for the time being, so for now on though, the game is actually going to be called Marvel Toucan Fighting Souls, which as a matter of fact, is going to be releasing until next year in 2026, and it's about to be releasing on not only for the PlayStation 5 and also PC. Now I'm pretty sure that could be also applies with any other systems as well. And speaking of fighting games in general, Bandai Namco is officially going to be releasing the previously announced Dragon Ball Gakushen Squadra on Nintendo Switch. So yeah, that seems kind of odd, kind of thinking about it. Although mind you though, it's about the fact that I'm not entirely sure of how I feel about that game personally, because I was still expecting to believe that when it comes to able to gain hyped about the forms of, you know, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero will eventually make it to Nintendo Switch 2, but again, time will definitely tell though, especially because obviously that Switch 2, you know, already came out recently. So, and as a matter of fact, it's been, you know, 2 days ago since we've heard about the fact that with Nintendo Switch 2 being released during that time, so but I digress. Oh, and speaking of the forms of Nintendo Switch 2 actually, I also did manage to find out that the Nintendo Switch 2 version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 Plus 4 basically though is about the fact that that particular version of the game will be coming onto Nintendo Switch 2 in the exact same day as any other system versions like PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X/S, even the Nintendo Switch 1, and it's going to be releasing on the July the 11th, so in this year in particular. So because of that though, but there's one little criticism I wasn't able to bring this up, and that's what appears to be for the fact that according to forms of certain messages for the sake of the forms of Red Dread, and in addition to a YouTube channel called Older New Gamer, which you definitely should be able to actually subscribe to him, by the way, because he did a really good job when it comes to likely game collecting and stuff like that, but I digress. So, and it did say about the fact that he did manage to point out that, unfortunately though, the physical version of the forms of, or should I say, the lack of the physical release of the Switch 2 version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 Plus 4. Unfortunately though, the Switch 2 version, how the heck did I somehow clip for that item box? I mean, I have no idea why it does manage to do that sometimes, but anyway. It did say on the front cover of the box, and it did say, download code only, which means, unfortunately though, no game card, or even no game key card for that matter, so, yeah, it's a bit of a waste though, so I have no choice but to go for a Switch 1 release, just because, at least on the Switch 1 version, at the very least you do able to actually get the game card itself. So at the very least, about the fact I like to keep things physically, so I might able to try to get the game itself on Switch 1 as opposed to the Switch 2 version, just because the Switch 2 version might be a missed opportunity. So because of that though, yeah, it's a bit of a nuisance though, and regardless of such though, I bet a lot of Tony Hawk fans are not going to be pleased about that. So when it comes to collecting physical stuff, you know, because as a matter of fact though, at this point in time, we're about to be moving on into the digital only content for now. So either way, the next thing I want to discuss upon actually is about the fact that thanks to the forms of the most recent events that has been happening since in yesterday, that the Summer Game Fest has already been happened. And my goodness, there's a lot of things to talk about. Like, for instance though, about the fact that we actually got ourselves a brand new release date for the likes of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, and the actual release date for the game is going to be due out at some point on September 25th in 2025. So no matter what though, that's roughly about 3 months after Mario Kart World came out. So because of that though, now, as a matter of fact though, in addition about the fact that they did show us a brand new trailer, but also, get this, we're about to be getting some very cool crossover characters is going to be playable. Like, for instance though, we're about to be receiving 3 at the moment during the forms of the actual launch or anything else like that. So, relatively speaking though, is about the fact that before we get into more details about this though, as a matter of fact, not only is it still going to be releasing on PlayStation 4, but in addition to PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X/S and even Xbox One, and as well as PC Steam, but then also Nintendo Switch 1, but also, out of nowhere, there's also going to be the Switch 2 version as well. However, unlike in Sonic X Shadow Generations for Switch 2, for what I've noticed, is about the fact that unlike in that particular game on Switch 2, that unfortunately though, when it comes to the physical version of Sonic X Shadow Generations, is locked up behind the game key card system. Well, suffice to say, I get the strong sense of feeling that Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, thankfully, does not have the game key card, so instead, it might actually feature the exact same functionality as the forms of Nintendo Switch 2 editions for some of these Switch 1 games, like for instance Super Mario Party Jamboree and Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and in addition to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, there's actually going to be an upgrade pack for Nintendo Switch 2. So no matter what though, that's actually pretty, well, suffice to say though, that's more like it, especially because I did manage to able to clearly see the actual see-through of that particular QR code on the bottom right corner of the actual box art, specifically the Switch 2 version of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, and I thought to myself, oh no, don't tell me it's going to be one of those game key card releases, but thankfully that's not the case. So, at the very least that's that. So, yeah, apparently we're about to be getting whopping 6 versions of, let's just say, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. So, That's maddening. I mean, kind of think about it, it reminds me of so much back in the old days whenever we did manage able to expect to get so many versions of Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, for instance, back in 2012, or technically 2013, because, you know, in 2013 that the 3DS version did came out, despite the fact that the 3DS version doesn't look nearly as nice compared to the forms of how it does on the console versions, so, but I digress. So, and believe it or not though, when it comes to the forms of the guest characters they'll bring up at first glance, with the forms of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, despite the fact that, well, a lot of people seem to be a little bit more skeptical about it now, which I have no idea why, but I suppose that particular conversation can wait. Probably at some point, for the sake of the forms of next year, for the sake of the forms of trying to do a Let's Play of the game, which we don't know exactly which specific version we might as well go for exactly, because we already know for the fact that we've already done Team Sonic Racing on the Nintendo Switch version specifically back in 2020, despite the fact that with the lack of opening cutscene here and there, which you get the idea for this point. So, anyway, in terms of the forms of the guest characters they'll bring in Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, which appears to be Hatsune Miku from the Hatsune Miku series, which is pretty obvious because she's actually the most popular mascot for Sega at the time, including Athletes itself as well. So yeah, pretty cool choice able to have her. In addition to that, there's also this peculiar guy called Ichiban from the likes of the Yakuza series as far as I'm aware. And unexpectedly, much like the forms of how it does in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate back in 2018, Joker from Persona series is going to make its playable debut in a kart racing game, which is pretty cool, especially because considering for the fact that in the Japanese version of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds was also going to be published by Athletes. So yeah, that's actually pretty swell. And like I said before, the game is expected to be releasing until September 25th in 2025. So yeah, I guess that pretty much settles in with the actual release date for it. So what needs left now is of course Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, not only for Switch 1, but as well as for Switch 2 as well. So again, I can't really tell what specific version I'm also going for exactly, depending on the forms of the performance and all that stuff. Not to mention though with the price tag itself as well. And speaking of the price tag though, my god, on Amazon right now in the UK, it is so disgustingly expensive right now for Nintendo Switch 2 system, in addition to with the bundle itself as well. Which, gee, no wonder why we somehow pre-order it in a different site. Which, yeah, we'll discuss more about that until tomorrow, so either way. And finally, most notably though, in regards to the forms of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, well, conveniently enough, there's actually going to be a ton of downloadable content is going to be on its way for that particular upcoming racing game, which not only does it bring in Season Pass for additional playable characters, but unexpectedly, we're about to be getting yet another set of playable characters as well. I mean, yeah, kind of thinking about it, it reminds me of so much of specifically the PC version of Sonic and All-Stars Racing Cross, what do I say Cross Worlds? I keep on thinking about something else. But anyway, it reminds me of so much of Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, where they did manage able to bring all kinds of different crossovers on the PC version, like for instance Heavy and Spy and the rest of the crew from the likes of Team Fortress 2 and a Football Manager, and in addition to other weird, obscure playable characters on the PC version, which I know for a fact that that was the only version I somehow skipped over, mainly because no matter what though, I still haven't exactly access to PC Steam, because I did originally try to able to actually participate on accessing the forms of Steam, but I'm like, I'm not I'm not entirely sure about that, because obviously though, that we attempt to save up for, you know, the upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 stuff, in addition to some exclusives for Switch 2, so you can get the idea for this point in a later down the road. So, but anyway, at the moment right now is that Minecraft is going to be coming onto Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. So as a matter of fact, not only you can able to play as Steve, but in addition to Alex and Creeper. Which, gee, no wonder why that Minecraft is so popular these days. Especially considering for the fact that, well, I also did somehow found out about the fact that when it comes to Sonic Racing Cross Worlds in general, might actually feature 10 free DLC characters in post-launch. So, as a matter of fact though, I get the feeling that much like the forms of how it does it on, let's say, Mario Tennis Aces, in addition to Mario Golf Super Rush and Mario Strikers Battle League Football, they may look like about the fact that certain playable characters will do shadow drops for its free game updates kind of system. So it has been a while since we actually come across into that particular situation in regards to the bombs are trying to able to actually access to other characters in particular. So yeah, that's as far as I can think about it. So anyway, the next thing we want to talk about, and that's what appears to be for the fact that Warner Bros. Somehow managed able to actually move the actual release date for the films of this upcoming Warner Bros. Movie called Animal Friends, and as a matter of fact, it's now going to be releasing until summer 2026, which I know for a fact it's hard for me to explain about this particular subject because it's been quite some time since we actually last mentioned about the forms of movie stuff in general. Although, to be fair though, it's about the fact that we'll let Maxi will mention more about it whenever he goes back on to experiencing Paper Mario again at some point in the next coming days, for specifically on Monday, because as you can probably tell, for the fact that we just want to get these games done before when Maxi will go back on experiencing Paper Mario and try to focusing on 2 games at a time as opposed to 3. So, because as a matter of fact, like we've already established that before, this year in particular has been all over the place with our channel. Like, on the other hand though, that I did have some high expectations, but on the other hand, unexpected events turned up. So, but anyway, the next thing I want to point out is about the fact that when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2, yes, indeed, about the fact that if you do manage to able to actually experience not only The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but in addition to The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, that, you know what the forms of that about the fact that the actual UI, or the user interface, did manage to tell you, like, for example, change bow, like you can switch bows quickly. As a matter of fact though, the actual picture model of the Nintendo Switch picture was actually now changed into Nintendo Switch 2 as opposed to Switch 1, because I do recognize about the fact that when it did say draw a bow, I do recognize there's actually a little tiny little black thing on here right next to the actual game card slot, which appears to be the microphone itself, so I can definitely tell there are some noticeable changes here and there when it comes to likely for its graphics and all that stuff, aside from, you know, improved frame rate and in addition to improved load times and all that stuff. So yeah, I guess that's relatively the case. So anyway, oh, and another thing too is about the fact that the reviews of Mario Kart World is up and running, and for the most part is actually doing pretty good so far. I mean, despite the fact that the fans did somehow feel a bit 50-50 on that. Well, on the other hand, the game is still doing really dang well, especially no wonder why that Mario Kart World is a launch title for Nintendo Switch 2. But on the other hand, it's about the fact that some fans complain about the forms of this empty open world structure, and not to mention though is about the fact that apparently the free roam bit is actually very boring for some players, which I still haven't exactly experienced the actual thing for myself, because obviously though we have to wait for a little while until we're able to actually finish this particular ROM hack first, as you probably already expect. What's even more crazy is about the fact that we did somehow manage to able to experience 2 of those familiar tracks, like for instance Desert Hills, in addition to Airship Fortress on Mirror Mode, because something tells me about the fact that we are now preparing for, you know, trying out Mario Kart World on Nintendo Switch 2. So, still, it's a pretty good coincidence to able to actually just, you know, revisiting this particular 2 of those courses again, but on Mirror Mode. So, yeah, I think that's as far as we can able to say. On the other hand, though, when it comes to Metacritic score so far for Mario Kart World, it did somehow receive for about, let's just say, 90% out of 100, so it's almost perfect. So no matter what though is about the fact that some of these changes will apply for when it comes to depending on the critics and audiences alike. Although speaking of which though is about the fact that I also did manage to able to find out about the fact that when it comes to the forms of you know, the Switch 2 version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 plus 4, they did manage able to point out when it comes to the Switch 2 version of the game will features high resolution, improved frame rate, and HDR support. So, much like any other games on Switch 2, which, yeah, you get the idea for that point. I would have liked to able to discuss more about the forms of the Summer Game Fest announcements here and there, but suffice to say though, we'll let, Maxi will mention more about it if he goes back on experiencing, you know, Paper Mario. So, yeah, that's about it for the versus race, basically. And also, we'd like to show you guys the last few bits before we basically done the ROM hack itself, which, as you can see, that much like the forms of the vanilla version of Mario Kart DS back then, obviously though multiplayer still applies, which you can either decide able to actually access to DS download play, and even Nintendo Wi-Fi connection was there, despite the fact that, you know, Nintendo Wi-Fi connection sadly shuts down since in 2014, at least as far as I can recall. And in addition to that, you can still see some records here that tells you the forms of the specific performance you did on several cups. What's even more odd about this is, though, is about the fact that, well, for the most part, when it comes to the forms of the standard Kart choices, as you can see on screen, they still literally has the exact same color scheme as the vanilla version of Mario Kart DS. In addition to that, those icons on the top screen, mainly the Shell Cup, Banana Cup, Leaf Cup, and Lightning Cup, did not get changed. So no matter what though, they're still relatively the same, and as a matter of fact, when it comes to the trophy sprites, they're all basically the exact same sprites as the vanilla version of Mario Kart DS. So, and also time trials was there, so just in case you can able to actually compare your time compared to the previous attempts. So, and like I said before, you can able to actually delete your ghost data if you wanted to. Well, regardless of such though, it's about the fact that, well, we're just going to leave it as it is. So, and lastly, we do have the friends list, which as a matter of fact, I don't have my friends on this particular ROM hack or anything, because obviously though is about the fact that, well, it's hard for me to able to actually access to that. So, and the final thing we'll show off is the options menu, which is self-explanatory, where you can basically change your sound settings, and in addition to some other stuff here and there. So, yeah, got nothing else to add. So, either way, that should be all set. So, and also with the forms the edited mode, like for instance, you can able to actually put in your nickname on here. In addition to that, much like the vanilla version of Mario Kart DS, there's also custom emblem you can paint. So, no matter what though, it's about the fact that, as you can see, Twilight Sparkle was actually on here. But as a matter of fact though, you can able to actually change your different characters if you want. Such as, for instance though, I would say press the LR buttons to able to actually change not only different cards, but in addition to different characters on screen as well. So you can do just that. So, yeah, no matter what though, let's give my final thoughts of the forms of the Pony Kart DS for the ROM hack for Mario Kart DS. I gotta say though, I was very impressed of how this mod actually plays out to be. I mean, sure, no matter what though, it does have some changes now and then when it comes to the forms of any other patch updates. Like, for instance, in Full Weather Circuit, in addition to Cloud Stadium, as far as I'm aware, they've now added in some different obstacles. In addition to the layout is basically different as well, which I would have liked to show you guys for that, but of course I'll put in the links in the description below, so you can able to actually see the comparison of the forms of the latest patch update for Pony Kart DS compared to the forms of how it does on the outdated patch ever since in, like, you know, since 2024. So, yeah, if you're a brony out there, I would able to actually recommend this ROM hack for you guys. Especially, it does manage to require some advanced techniques in order to able to actually access this mod. But for what it's worth though, it still plays pretty much like the forms of how it does on the actual Mario Kart DS game, but with pony characters and all that stuff, despite the fact that there's only one downside with this ROM hack though, and that's the absence of missions mode, which, to be honest, I don't mind about it at all, especially because no matter what though, I'm very pleased able to actually check this ROM hack out. So no matter what though, we can able to expect able to try out the because relatively speaking, there's also the Pony Kart 64 ROM hack as well, but unfortunately though, I haven't exactly accessed to that particular ROM hack for the time being. So from now on though, because we are now finally making our way to the next Mario Kart game, which is of course Mario Kart World, so stay tuned for that particular Let's Play once that particular, well, once we make our way to 2026, as a matter of fact, which, again, we'll stay tuned for that. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching of our Let's Play of Pony Kart DS, the ROM hack of Mario Kart DS Let's Play. It's been a lot of fun, and I can definitely tell for sure that the views count was actually, quite high at this rate, so I can totally see why, that a lot of players seems to really enjoy this Let's Play so far, just for curiosity's sake and all that stuff. So either way, this is me, Lola Bunny, here from the likes of the Mexi Toys, and next up in terms of the Mario Kart series of Let's Plays is the most recent entry in the series, that's of course Mario Kart World for the Nintendo Switch 2, so prepare for that in the future. So I'll see you guys and join at some point. Bye!